The midseason madness and spring stage are officially in the history books. Time to take a look back and reevaluate on where we've come so far. It is mid-season power rankings time. As usual, you'll get an on-screen ranking for where a team places, both in their own region and where I have them overall. And the number they go up or down by will be in comparison to my power rankings from last month. I won't lie to you, a lot of teams are staying exactly where they were, so we might fly through parts of this rankings video, and this especially holds true for the bottom tier, so hold on tight. Before getting into the rankings though, just wanted to do a quick plug, as I am now officially on TikTok. I'm going to try posting over there a bit in the future, really soon, to try and grow my audience. So if you want to get some additional content that you wouldn't find on this YouTube channel, then definitely give it a follow. Anyway, kicking off at number 19 is still the Vegas Eternal. Admittedly, their final couple of games showed maybe a bit more life, and supposedly they might be making some big changes heading into the second half of this year. But here in the present time, they're definitely the worst team in the league. Malthel and Vulcan can't really do much of anything. The team has shown very little progress since the beginning of the season, and they're 0-8 with one map win to their names, so that's really all you need to hear. Also staying at the same spot is the Valiant at number 18. Listen, I would love to bump them up if I could, but they're only better than one team for sure, and there's only so much that you can say about a roster that went 0-8. I appreciate their competitive drive and taking the Mayhem to map 5, but they really haven't done much of anything in most of their games. I am a pretty big fan of how they play around Seeker and CJ, and I'm excited to see how they do with the upcoming balance changes coming into effect, but until they actually win a game, or another team somehow plays worse, bottom 2 is a permanent stay. At 17th still remains the Shanghai Dragons. The Dragons are pretty fortunate that they got a win, otherwise they might be even lower here. The Fleta struggles have been absolutely abysmal, and it's actual punishment to force that guy to play Winston almost all the time. It only puts the Dragons at an even worse disadvantage, which obviously is not what you want to be doing when they're already underdogs as it is. They're one-dimensional, they're inflexible, and hard to watch. And the Eastern Knockouts only further confirmed how bad they are, because they lost to not one, but two contenders teams in a row as the OWL team in a big tournament, so they kind of deserve to be at the bottom of their region and one of the bottom teams in the league. And not far behind them is the Seoul Dynasty at number 16. Honestly, their placement is more warranted than ever before after witnessing the atrocity that was the spring stage knockouts. A team with Prophet and Void should never be losing to a contenders team. There is no world where that is ever okay, and it essentially highlights a first half where they've basically done nothing since week 1. They've had major Sombra and support line problems, which are literally the most impactful aspects of the current meta. It's just a very sad performance, and unless EasyHunt is like the Lord and Savior himself, the Dynasty may be in for more of the same as we head into half 2. And at number 15, surprise surprise, it's the Defiant. Much like the Dynasty, they basically only further confirmed that their placement should be low after an awful tournament showing. That NYXL game was genuinely the cherry on top of a lackluster performance. Every time they started to play even somewhat decently, they found ways to choke. They'd get complacent and they'd get sloppy. If they managed to play even up to a lick of their potential, there is no world where they'd be losing to NYXL or the Spitfire. Those are games they should just not be losing. And it's because of that that I think we can firmly call them a bottom 3 team in NA as of right now. It's that poor tracer play and lack of execution and the obvious looks of defeat from their players that has led to a very disappointing first half. They feel very fortunate to me to only be 2 wins below 500 with how they've played, and I just pray that their new additions provide a well-needed mindset change. And lastly, ending our run of no movement at number 14 is London. Considering they haven't played since the last time I made one of these, there's no real reason to move them up or down. I'm hopeful that the May Cassidy buffs get them more in their comfort zone moving forward, but here in the present, they still did have a pretty abysmal first half with really poor performances on dive comms, and they're mostly where they are because teams played even worse than they did. Now to move into the first team that saw some movement. At 13th is the NYXL. Honestly, New York didn't play painfully worse or better than last month. It's more so that other teams improved their stock. On New York's end, I think they got another positive under their belts with a tournament win against Toronto, but I'd say they also played noticeably worse against a team that they already defeated beforehand, like the Justice, showing that maybe they did get a bit lucky against them. I'm loving that dynamic of their DPS and creative though, and I have high hopes that they can continue to show progression as a team here in the future. They have a lot of solid playmakers, and their coaching has been good enough. They have proven themselves to a certain extent, but they don't quite piece it together in a way from a team perspective to give them a super high rating. Number 12. The Vancouver Titans. The ATP Vancouver Stunks are an absolute shambles. I really thought they were starting to turn the corner. The sugar-free Aspire role swaps looked very promising, the backline was playing pretty clutch, and they were even playing up to a lot of solid teams. A tournament run felt so doable, but when push came to shove, they got exposed. Almost winning and being competitive only counts for so much. When everything was on the line, that lack of experience and overall star power came back to bite them. Vancouver were one and done in the knockouts. The Shock were definitely a team they could have beaten. In my opinion, they probably should have, and it's because they disappointed, along with having no real accomplishments so far, that they have to go down in the rankings. Number 11. The San Francisco Shock. The Shock come out and get a pretty small bump up. The Titans and alexyOWL were getting rated a bit too highly clearly, so clutching out a close game over Vancouver and at least taking a map against Mayhem definitely gives them a deserving boost. This kind of performance had some pros and cons. I think the cool thing was they found a composition that could give them some success outside of that dive comp they've been struggling with. The Orisa Kiriko Moira strat definitely worked wonders. But on the downside, this type of anti-meta comp is just a way to temporarily escape an unavoidable weakness that you have to deal with. You have to play the dive if you're trying to be elite right now, and until the Shock can prove they're elite on this composition, they'll never be anything more than mid-tier. A sign of life is surely a start, but now they have to build upon it. Moving into the 10 spot, I've got the Dallas Fuel. This is a combo of other teams underperforming and Dallas playing slightly better. You gotta give them some credit for sure, as they came out of the gates flat but have steadily improved since. They've allowed Hanbin to play more up to his comfort, and I think the backline has shown some signs of life. They did pretty well for themselves getting to the knockout finals. I mean, not everybody expected them to beat a team like O2 Blast, and not many people expected them to even look competitive against Infernal in that winner's final. They're obviously far from perfect, but it's that jolt they needed to give you some kind of hope. And with Dallas now having the most recent iteration of Junker Queen at their disposal, there's probably a chance that Hanbin and the boys carry that momentum to an even higher level. At the 9 spot is going to be the Guangzhou Charge, and oh man, the Charge continue to plummet after their hot start this year. It's saddening to witness a team with all of this talent come and just finish flat like how they did. Unconvincing victories, getting reverse swept by Spark, and then of course getting 3-1 by Dreamers is not a very good look for a team that not that long ago was clearly the best in the Eastern Conference. There is zero excuse to not even be making the knockout finals. Like, in the most important game of their season up until that point, they couldn't even be a contenders team. Choi Se-won finally did not show up, and the one time he didn't, his team paid dearly. But at the end of the day, I think most of all that being unable to play Sombra or Ramatra has become a real Achilles heel that puts them behind a lot of these other rosters. They've got to step up and learn the meta fully and be more flexible. That weakness is becoming more and more prevalent by the week, and until it is fixed, they might end up staying more in the middle tier rather than at that higher tier that we know they can play at. Moving on to the 8th spot, we're going with the Washington Justice. The Justice don't see much movement this go-around. I'd say maybe a small bump up is warranted for almost beating Boston and getting revenge over New York. The DPS play has still been exceptional, and they've shown they can occasionally punch above their weight class, but Justice also showed they're definitely still a step or two behind. I don't know if they're maybe not flexible enough, or if the execution is lacking, but something's missing. They might not have the star power needed to be at that top level. The Justice feel like that above average team that can win a lot of their games, but never any of the important ones. Now, perhaps the support and upcoming meta changes could change their future before it's too late. Clearly, there was some discourse with that backline, and maybe replacing FD God with a better option will make them more consistent moving forward. And moving on to the 7th spot is the LA Gladiators, and I'll gladly take the L on this one. I never should have moved them as low as I did during the previous ranking. One map away from Korea is all you need to see. They nearly made the Mayhem go from a 3rd place finisher in Midseason Madness to not making Korea in general. Glads were playing like they were worthy and like they wanted it. Kevster is still an absolute freak, and so is that backline. But at the end of the day, they still did come up short despite having 2 shots to do so. I'd say that the current meta maybe isn't the best for them. Yaki Sombra has proven to be hit or miss, and honestly, they could probably use some additional help at tank so they're more flexible. Gladiators are good performers who elevate their games during big matches, but their peaks never seem to last. They're really good when they hit, but it only lasts for like a game or two. The consistency with this group has to improve if they want to take another step. Number 6, the Seoul Infernal. I really want to place them lower for their abysmal tournament. Their Sombra play and their dive is pretty trash compared to a top level Western team, but I also realize that I can't be too harsh based on one event when they weren't really supposed to win to begin with. I cannot deny that they at least deserve some credit for showing some resilience against the Mayhem and for winning their knockout group pretty convincingly. And to their credit, I think that Mag, Skewed, and Zest have all been top-level players at their positions, and MN3 when he actually gets to play Hitscan. Infernal showed me enough to suggest that they're definitely top half of the league, and since they made the tournament, I think they deserve a little bit of a boost. And there's a lot of potential for this team to get even better if we shy away from the Sombra stuff. There's still a lot of work to do with Seoul Infernal, but maybe not as much as we think. At the number 5 slot, I've got the Hangzhou Spark. Okay, now this is an APAC team that deserves some praise. They were hella clutch for a good number of games all in a row. Their knockout performance was absolutely brilliant, showing some great composure against the charge, and then basically dominating everybody else. They had a lot to prove heading into the knockouts, and they passed with flying colors. But then it continues into the mid-season madness. As an Eastern team, you really don't expect much out of them to make a deep run, but they went out there and they managed to take a game against the 3rd place finisher, once and for all showing to my stupid eyes that Shy can indeed play a clutch Sombra. They didn't do much of anything else in this tournament, but that was really all I needed to see to confirm that as of right now, they're the best team in the East. But that doesn't mean they have absolutely no improving to do. The Spark as of right now are very one-dimensional. They can only play that Winston comp, and if you take away their DPS, if you take them out of the equation, this team basically crumbles like a cookie. And on top of that, right now, they have to figure out how they're going to do with Coach Rui moving away to take care of his pregnant wife, meaning the Spark have a new leader in charge that they're going to have to listen to, and all of this combined could either be a kryptonite that ends their season totally, or one that saves them heading into the second half. Taking up the 4th slot is going to be the Boston Uprising. I think the knockouts and their general mid-season madness performance was enough to suggest that Boston are hovering around that top 5 area. They stepped up very big in a lot of important games to get here. Led by Decay, Twilight, and a team full of champions, the Boston Uprising are proven, especially on the dive comp. The thing is, though, they still have some weird inconsistencies where they either play down to their competition, like we saw against Justice, or lay a massive egg, like in that Mayhem game. They lost just the first map in that series, mind you, and suddenly they were totally boomed. They stopped believing in their abilities, and they looked very desperate despite having a group of champions that should be accustomed to these kinds of moments. They lack the resilience and consistency, which is not something that we should be saying about a team like this. They can play their Winston Tracer Ana really well, but when that doesn't work, there are some obvious problems. Boston are pretty damn good. I think for the most part, you can't give them too much hate. They clear 3/4 of the league rather easily, but there is an obvious gap between them and the top 3. Speaking of the top 3, the next spot belongs to the Florida Mayhem, and I feel pretty weird about this one. On one hand, nobody can deny that the Mayhem had their fair share of downs. Their first round knockout choke to the Gladiators, and then their first round midseason madness choke to the Spark show some major signs of inconsistency. However, the Mayhem also deserve a lot of credit, because once they get it going, they become one of the strongest and most versatile teams in the league. Not to mention that people like Checkmate and Someone become very clutch. The Mayhem are really good whenever it's win or go home, and that's a pretty good quality to have. I don't like that it requires them being humbled to remember how to play Overwatch. It's not the best look in the world, but I can't be too much of a hater because they still did pull out top 3 in midseason madness even after a choke. They still made Korea, and then they nearly beat the Houston Outlaws again. The Mayhem have a really strong bounce back game, and that's a good quality to have in a team. The thing is though, now we need to see them improve. Make sure they don't have to be in those scenarios in the first place, and then either find a way to beat the Outlaws or the Atlanta Reign to crack that top 2 in potential title contender conversation. If they can do that, and maybe get some good performances from people outside of Checkmate in the clutch, the Mayhem might just progress to a brand new level. Now, of course, moving into the obvious number 2 spot is going to be the Outlaws. I've said it many times already here in the past, so I'll make this quick. They're the only team who can push Atlanta Reign right now. The only team in the entire league. They're obviously the only team at their level and are basically in a tier of their own right now. The Outlaws are absolutely insane, and if it weren't for Atlanta, they would be the obvious midseason madness champion. But hey, you can't really be too mad, as they still had a really good tournament and overall showing. Their first finals performance and their first silver medal after 5.5 years is some good progression, and the team itself is looking really good. They're like the only other truly dominant Sombra team in the league, and their backline is so easily better than like 95% of the other teams. The Outlaws gap basically every team in the league in so many different ways, and there's pretty much nothing bad to say about them. It's just a matter of beating Atlanta now if they want to be number 1. And of course that means that the obvious number 1 is going to be the Atlanta Reign. They went into this tournament as the best team in the world, and they left this tournament as the best team in the world. Reign are simply in a class of their own right now, with the dominance that they have demonstrated on these Sombra compositions. Lip just clears everybody else on that character. It's kind of ridiculous, but then you also have arguably the best Tracer in the game right now in Stalker, and most importantly, the league's best backline. Chio and Fielder open up the game in so many ways with near perfect decision making. Having a strong backline of this level and that kind of Sombra execution makes it very unfair for the rest of the league. Every single member of this Reign team has also stepped up when they needed to, and I think the Reign deservingly have gotten their first trophy ever. People question if this kind of dominance can continue if a Sombra meta goes away, but I don't think people know what they're in for at this group. With clutch Gigabrains like that on their side, they should be good no matter what comes their way. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it looks like Sombra's not going anywhere anytime soon, so get used to the Reign. They ain't going anywhere. Other than that, I think you kind of get the idea. Reign are definitely the best in the league, so we'll leave it at that, which concludes our mid-season power rankings. Overall, not too many significant changes compared to the previous month. The teams taking the most notable jumps this go-around are Gladiators, Shock, and Dallas, but that's mostly due to me either overrating a team or teams underperforming, and in return we'd see the Titans in Charge go down one of the more notable declines. It's not by that many spots, but they're probably the most noteworthy teams that got hurt. Now, since we're heading towards a new patch, I'm not exactly sure how well these power rankings are gonna hold up over the next couple of weeks. The new patch could see a partial shakeup, with a lot of these middling teams such as London and Dallas maybe playing better from it. But at the same time, it looks like we'll see a lot of the same, at least based off of what I've seen so far, so maybe this won't be as bad as I think. Let me know your thoughts about my rankings down in the comments below. Make sure to leave your own as well. Give this video a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And until the next one, I'm out of here. Peace.